The story of clothing is not just about fabrics and fashion, it's about us, and part of what made and continues to make us human.
See the spark in the mud. Every hard road made a better blood. Still learning how to human.
Before humans built cities, before written language, before money, humans wrapped themselves against the cold. Clothing may seem ordinary now, but for most of human history, what we wore determined whether we survived. And over time, clothing became something more, not just protection, but identity, status, beauty, belonging, self-expression, and maybe even performance. So, how did clothing evolve from survival into fashion? And what does that transformation reveal about us? The earliest humans were likely covered in far more body hair than we are today. But over time, humans began losing their natural covering. Eventually, we created a second skin. Most researchers believe simple clothing may have begun with Homo erectus, possibly more than 1 million years ago. And it wasn't fashion and certainly not vanity. It was simply survival. The Ice Age lasted from around 2.5 million years ago until roughly 11,700 years ago. So as humans migrated out of Africa and into colder climates, those without adequate protection from the environment simply didn't survive. And from that standpoint, clothing may have been one of humanity's greatest evolutionary adaptations. At first, clothing was likely simple animal hides draped over the body, but around 40,000 years ago, hide needles began appearing in the archaeological record. Tiny little tools, easy to overlook, but they tell us something extraordinary. Humans were no longer simply covering themselves. They were designing. Sewing fitted garments, layering clothing, and planning for different environments. And maybe for the first time, humans began expressing identity through what they wore. Interestingly, the evolution of clothing almost mirrors human psychological development itself. There's a theory in psychology called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the base are our most basic survival needs: food, water, warmth, and shelter. And that's exactly where clothing begins, as protection. A substitute for the fur we lost through evolution. But as human needs expanded, so did clothing. It moved upward, from survival to safety. Because clothing protected us from harsh environments, cold, heat, rain, and injury. And then came belonging. Humans are deeply social creatures, and clothing became part of social acceptance, group identity, and eventually modesty. What we wore communicated, I belong here. Then came status, respect, admiration, and power. Clothing became decorative, fashionable, and symbolic. Certain fabrics, colors, and/or styles communicated wealth and importance. Eventually, clothing became self-expression, personal style, creativity, and individual identity. What began as survival became an expression of the human self. And as civilizations developed, clothing became deeply connected to culture and environment. In ancient Egypt, for example, lightweight linen woven from flax helped people survive the desert heat. But clothing also became decorative during that time. Men and women wearing makeup, jewelry, and wigs alongside their clothing. Fashion had arrived. And in ancient Rome, the colors of clothing reflected social rank. Purple, for example, was associated with the ruling class. And across the world, cultures developed their own unique styles. From the flowing robes and turbans of the Ottoman Empire, the elegant kimonos of Japan, the patterned fabrics of West Africa, and the layered gowns of Europe, clothing became storytelling, and also became identity woven into fabric. Now fast forward to the Industrial Revolution and everything accelerated. It transformed clothing forever. Mass production made garments cheaper and more accessible. Fashion spread globally as styles moved across borders faster than ever before. Blue jeans, which for example were originally created for laborers because they were durable, quickly became one of the most recognizable items of clothing on Earth. And the t-shirt was originally created as an underlayer for the US Navy, became universal. So as we can see, the practicality of these clothing items initially just met the needs of working class laborers. But then there's a shift. Clothing no longer simply reflected culture, it began shaping it. And eventually, fashion began moving faster than humans themselves. Trends changed constantly, celebrity culture accelerated desire, and then the internet made fashion global almost instantly. Now, clothing can be designed, manufactured, marketed, and worn almost anywhere in the world within days. What began as survival became creativity. But honestly, at this point, fashion trends move so quickly that some of us are still emotionally trying to process skinny jeans while the internet has already moved on 3 times. It's fascinating, really. Humans are fascinating. We started with animal hides, just trying not to freeze to death, and somehow ended up debating whether socks with sandals are socially acceptable. But such is the evolution of clothing. What began as protection slowly became a way to express who we are, from necessity to belonging, from survival to identity. Every culture, every generation, every era has used clothing to answer the same quiet question: who are we now? Because fashion changes constantly, but humans are changing constantly too. But what is clothing actually for now? Protection, modesty, beauty, status, self-expression, belonging, all of the above? Somewhere along the way, humans began attaching value not just to the usefulness of clothing, but to the image it creates. And that shift carries consequences. Factory labor exploitation, environmental pollution, mass textile waste, and disposable consumption. Fashion now moves faster than humans can emotionally or environmentally process. And this is referred to as fast fashion, creating cheap, rapidly produced clothing designed to follow trends, encourage frequent buying and disposal. The industry contributes to a massive increase in clothing consumption and waste, as garments are often worn only a few times before being discarded. It is responsible for about 8 to 10% of global carbon emission, and the fashion industry is the second largest consumer of water globally. Uses approximately 2,700 liters of water for just a cotton t-shirt, and about 7,600 liters for a pair of jeans. Clothing waste is a major issue. Millions of tons of textiles end up in landfills where synthetic materials can take decades or centuries to break down. We buy more, we keep less, we discard quickly. Still searching for something, looking for new ways to reinvent ourselves. Because humans don't just desire to survive. We also desire to belong, to be admired, to express ourselves, to become someone, and maybe none of those desires are inherently wrong, but perhaps wisdom is learning how to pursue them responsibly, to create beauty without exploitation, and to express identity without losing humility. I hope humans never stop creating fashion, even if I can't keep up with it personally. Fashion is fun, it can be art, it can be culture, and it is all good. But hopefully we continue learning how to create in ways that protect not just ourselves, but also the people around us and the world we all share. It's wonderful and truly incredible that what began as animal hides protecting early humans from ice age winds eventually became one of humanity's most creative forms of self-expression. The story of clothing is not just about fabrics and fashion, it's about us, and part of what made and continues to make us human.